my name's Corinne Pullman, and I work for Myriad Editions, and we're very proud to be publishing Nicola's book, Billy, Me and You. We're also, it's great to have here Sarah Leavitt, all the way from Canada. And I'm also sort of privileged to actually have read Sarah's book, which is has just recently been published by Jonathan Cape. And both books are absolutely terrific. And I was at a comics forum in Leeds last week, the Graphic Medicine Comics Forum. And both Nicola and Sarah were speaking about their books and gave amazing presentations. So, you know, one of the reasons why this has come about, we just thought it would be kind of great to have them in conversation. And Paul Gravett very kindly set that up with Orbital and made it all happen. So, so that's great. So, Nicola Streeten, Sarah Leavitt, converse.
Take it away. So should we explain what we're going to do, Sarah?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want to explain it? Yeah, I know you want to explain it.
So Sarah's going to do a 10-minute introduction about herself and her background, and then I'll give a 10-minute introduction, then we put something together to base the conversation on.
Yes. All right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about why and how I did my book. And then I'm going to read 3 short chapters, but if I start running out of time, I won't. But just to give you a sense of my book. So my book came out in Canada in September 2010, and it came out from Jonathan Cape this month. I'm just going to show you a couple of photos. The reason, so my book is about my mom who died of Alzheimer's in 2004, and she was very young. She was only 60 when she died. And the reason I wrote the book was because she had always been this very protective, vibrant force in my life. This is us in the 1970s when she had an afro. And then she after she got sick, she changed to this very fearful woman who had difficulty kind of negotiating her way through space. You know, if you have people with dementia in your life, you know that they forget things, but also they just kind of lose their ability to know where their body is and to figure out how to walk and sit up and sit down and get up. So that's, my mom became very different, and I lived on the other side of the country from her. She lived in New Brunswick, which is on the east coast of Canada, and I live in Vancouver, which is on the west coast, so I would go and visit her a few times a year and spend time with her. And she was sick for about 6 years, and during that time I kind of collected a bunch of notes and drawings in sketchbooks and journals, and this is just a small collection of them. I just show this so that you know what a huge effort I had to do to pare them down into something as small as a book. And so one of the things about Alzheimer's is that people say and do things that are so strange and interesting. So there was this part of me, you know, my heart was breaking as her daughter and somebody who loved her, but there was this part of me who, as a writer, I kept thinking, wow, this is something that I have to tell other people about, and it's so strange. And if I don't write it down, I'll probably remember it wrong and try to impose some sort of meaning on it that it doesn't have. So I would just keep little scraps of paper on me and write things down, like, you know, there was this one time that I walked in the room and she just turned around and said, oh, there's another person, I have one too. And I don't know what that means. Or looking in the mirror and saying, this is live, which, you know, you could impose some sort of meaning on, but it could have just been some part of her brain that was making up ideas. And so this is one of the sketches I did of her, and one of the things about her was that she would keep her hands clenched all the time. And she started that very soon after she became ill, and that kind of became a theme in the drawings throughout the book. And I just would write down all the things that I could possibly observe about her. So it took me about 4 years after she died to put all my drawings and my notes together into a book and to do a few versions of them. And I'm just going to go through, well, my hope is through short chapters just to give you a sense of the book. So the first chapter is called Nightmares, and I'll just show you the first page of it and then read through the panels. When I was little, we lived in the country in an old rented farmhouse. I slept upstairs at the back of the house in a creaky bed that the owners had left behind. The flowers in the wallpaper changed shape at night. Rats and squirrels ran up and down inside the walls. Evil creatures lurked under the bed, so I couldn't get out unless I kind of jumped away from the bed. I never forgot the chapter in Little House on the Prairie where a mouse chews off some of Pa's hair. I buried myself under the covers until I fell asleep. But then the nightmares started. A robber caught me, or a black rider, or a flying monkey. I'd wake myself up screaming, and then I'd wait to be rescued. My mom was like Miss Clavel in the Madeline books, waking up in the middle of the night. And I was Madeline, and something was not right. Miss Clavel ran so fast down the hall that her body got all stretched out. I'd listen for the sounds of my mother's footsteps coming towards my room. When she got to my room, I would pretend to be asleep so that she would have to wake me from my nightmare. She would sit on the bed, and she was heavy and real, and I knew I would never be scared again. It's okay, honey. It was just a dream. I had nightmares right through high school. She always ran to me when I called her. Years after I had left home and moved across the country, I had a strange nightmare. My mother was floating away from me. She was wearing a long nightgown, and she seemed confused. I woke up crying, but she wasn't there. So that's the first chapter in my book. And I can see from here I have like this nail sticking through my head, but it's not touching. That's how I feel right now. This was a dream I had about six years before my mom was diagnosed, or before we realized she was sick. And then I actually just read you one other chapter from when she was sick, to get a sense of some about her. So it's called Gaps. And this is from when she had been sick for about 2 or 3 years. I spent the next summer writing left-handed to strengthen my brain. I filled pages and pages with alphabets and encouraging notes to myself. You know, I was trying to keep up my spirits. When I visited Mom, I wrote left-handed every night in one journal and kept my sketches and notes in another. So this is just a really detailed description I wrote up of how my mother would wiggle her fingers and rub her hands, and wondering why. Mom did not know what tank top meant. She didn't recognize pineapple weed, which we always called chamomile, and which we used to pick and eat together when I was a kid. One day we took a walk, and we passed a preteen boy on the street. Oh, that was Jessica. How nice of her to remember us. One morning she stood behind me, grinding her teeth as I tried to eat some eggs. I have good news for you and Hannah. Hannah was my sister. Things are getting better. Lots of research. I knew what she meant. Research for a cure for Alzheimer's. I lost my appetite. She was furious with herself that summer. I'm a pain in the ass. This is all so hard on Dad. There were more gaps in her speech. She pursed her lips and breathed out hard as she searched for words. Sometimes on the couch or in the car, she'd pull her knees up, like she wasn't sure how to fit her body onto the seat. Meals could be really bad times for her. I don't want to eat anymore. One night we went to a Chinese restaurant, and Mom really wanted to use chopsticks. She kept trying to pick up little bits of food, but she couldn't get anything into her mouth. God, Dad, give her a fork. Here, Midgie, let me take these. Rob, every time I find something that brings me joy, you take it away. I can't believe you. Dad spends his whole life trying to help you. Jesus Christ. That's enough, Sarah. She doesn't know what she's saying. It doesn't help anyone when you get mad at her. Another day. I love having you here. I just get so angry. It's just too much. Please don't take it personally. Oh, Mom. I've lost all my sweetness. It might have been easier if that had been true. But she still brought me flowers from the garden, tiny yellow ones she'd crumpled in her hands. And when her beloved Lucy killed a songbird, it broke her heart. And Lucy was her cat. That chapter I included partly because in my book I always wanted to show the parts where I did a good job of supporting my mother, and also the parts where I would get mad, like in the Chinese restaurant where it was driving me insane to watch her try to pick up food with one chopstick. So this chapter is called The Kitty, and it's about my mom's cat that she was obsessed with. Actually, it's just an excerpt from it. But Lucy was stocky with small ears and round, close-set eyes. She looked like the offspring of the owl and the pussycat. Mom loved all animals, but she was obsessed with Lucy. There you are, darling. Oh, look how smart she is. Beautiful. Just look at her eating her food. Lucy never seemed to care about people that much. She spent a good part of the day under the covers on Mom and Dad's bed, or under the shed, or in the tall grass near the garden. According to Mom, Lucy was very affectionate. But not long after they got Lucy, Mom's movements got too unpredictable for any cat, especially an aloof one. Lucy, come here, darling, so I can brush you. Lucy only cuddled with Dad. She sat on his lap occasionally, and he would rest his coffee cup on her flat head. She seemed to like it. After a brief period of sleeping on my parents' bed at night, Lucy didn't come near Mom much at all, but Mom never seemed to realize this. She would always ask where Lucy was when she went to bed. At some point we started lying and saying that Lucy was in the room. It helped her calm down and go to sleep. Sometimes Mom's undying love for Lucy drove me crazy. It pissed me off that she couldn't see what Lucy was really like. Lucy, you don't know how good you have it here on Grateful Cat. I sometimes got a small, mean satisfaction from speaking the unspeakable. She's the coldest cat I've ever met. But then I would relent. Wow, Mom, look how great Lucy is. Yeah. I made Mom little books about Lucy and cards and small photo albums. She liked to carry them around. She recognized and talked about Lucy even when she seemed confused about who I was. Is it weird to be jealous of a cat? And I'll end. Nicola?
Thank you. Okay, so my name's Nicola Streeten, and I did Billy, Me and You, which is on the front, a memoir of grief and recovery. And it started, it's based on a story that happened to, well, a real life experience that happened 16 years ago. I had a 2-year-old child that died. And at the time, I wrote a journal, a written journal of what I was going through, and my now husband. And 12 or 13 years, I came back to it and decided to do it as a graphic novel, and I'll talk a bit about why. Part of the story, for those of Billy, Me and You, is part of my grieving process. Immediately, I was writing about the actual experience, trauma, in prose, but I was drawing at the same time, but I wasn't drawing about the experience, so it's quite different to Sarah's experience. I was drawing these funny little gags and cartoons about parenting, and I had a friend I had at the time who had a greeting card publishing company, and she saw one I'd done and said, let's do it as greeting cards. So over the next 5 years we did about 80 in this series, and it was their best-selling line, so it kick-started my my life as an illustrator. So from this great traumatic experience I started doing, and this is probably 2 or 3 years ago, this is the more typical type of editorial illustration work I've been doing since. And so all the time in the 13 years I've been drawing and incorporating text as well. Shall I read it, or can you get the idea? And then after 2007, I've had a nice enough life as an illustrator. I've had jobs coming in, but I was feeling it's, I don't know, for anyone who's freelance perhaps, there's that situation where if you have work, you're busy doing it, and if you don't, you still don't get on with your own work because you're panicking about the next job coming in. So I was doing this thing, I never do my own work. I'm a little bit bored of the commissions because I'm always responding to someone else's brief. So I signed up to do an MA at the University of Lincoln, which is near where I live. And it was a very open MA, and I wanted to do a graphic novel. And I'd, at that time, felt able to visit these written journals for the first time. So I thought, oh, that's it. This, I knew, like Sarah, I had at the time the feeling, at the time of the trauma, this is the biggest thing that has ever happened to me. And so it's that idea of coming back to, I know one day I want to do something with it. So for the MA, and then for the MA, I gave a presentation to the class about my MA proposal, the gender balance in the graphic novel in the UK in the 21st century, blah, 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 history of comics. Oh, and I'm going to do a graphic novel about the death of the child. I said a child, of course I meant my child. Luckily there was an opportunity for critical feedback. Depressing subject matter. I don't like comics. Why wouldn't I read a normal novel and use my imagination? I don't need the pictures, and two people were asleep, obviously. I realised that my narrative had begun and that I had no easy task ahead. So I think what it, very quickly when I started, I realised my interest was in the subject matter rather than I was in a design context where they were concentrating on how it would look. So that's why I swapped to an academic. This is also, I look forward to tutorials, to deep discussion about the meaning of life, religion and politics. And here I am going, you see how Thatcher decimated the system, and now look, there's talk of nationalising banks and opening coal mines, crying out. And then there's the student saying, what is Thatcher? And I mean, he was Dutch, but he had been in England for 2 years, but it was that age thing, and I suddenly thought, oh. And then I suppose education is about something else these days. And again, I was surrounded by young designers who were looking towards the end product and slightly different ambitions. So then I thought, well, I'll carry on academically researching about how narrative structure works and about the graphic novel and women. And part of that research was reading graphic novels that I like. And as Virginia Woolf says, I meant to write about death, but life came crashing in as usual. Because what happened then was I had, in the story, we had another child, a second child, after Billy died 2 years after. And now she's 14, but when she was about 12, she was looking over my shoulder and saying, can we do a comic? Because I was reading up about comics. And so we started doing these little zines called Licorice. And it was really nice because it was about cookery and playing and little light-hearted things. And then I started inserting this rather dark subject matter of the chapter of my graphic novel. So see, these are some of the covers. We're on issue 7 now. You can have a look afterwards. It's a dog special. So this is, recipes, and this is quite good because my husband Joy, he has to do the men's page, the art of navel gazing. Some people see pictures in clouds or in crackling fires. For those moments when you're at a loose end or bored, why not try and find pictures in your navel? So it was this sort of stupid stuff, and then this. And that's the children's bit. Why don't kids poo at school, and lies parents tell you? So it's all this, and then of course this is my youngest daughter, and so she has her own page, which is Holly, and then we live also. Part of also the end of Billy Me and You is we moved to the country to a derelict chapel, and so that was a new chapter of our life. But we live in a very small village, and they have these traditional produce shows where people come with big marrows, and they have this category called digitally enhanced photography, and every year I put in one of these dog women things, and I never ever win. And one year I was the only entry, and they still didn't. And when you win, you get a rosette and a certificate, and then the final year, they just stopped doing it. The final year, the winner was a photo of a boy dressed up as Sherlock Holmes. I couldn't believe it. I felt like, is there an appeal system? But then I had to live in the village. So I thought, well, we can put it in our comic. And then this is Holly's fashion show. So it's quite good fun as well. And then we have these paper doll competition in the magazine as well. And this is the latest one. It's do a design for your dog. For the pug, and again I was still drawing illustration commissions. So this is for a book about parenting and work-life balance that I did. And then by now I changed to an academic course. The lecture series on my course was good, and then I was learning about positivism by men, structuralism by men, phenomenology by men, Marxism by men, postmodernism by men, semiotics by men, post-structuralism. So it's all these things that they were teaching us about the main sort of proponents of these theories. It's quite male-based systems, and I was thinking, what about feminism? Oh, no, it doesn't. I was told it doesn't really count as a proper, locate yourself. You have to be a Marxist with a feminist slant, or all this rubbish. And then I was also going to public talks then emerging in London about the graphic novel. But there was one where I put up my hand and said, where are the women? And I could feel everyone going, oh God, totally relevant, be quiet and read Foucault, feminist, Dyke, brilliant, was one person. And we met over coffee, and I felt embarrassed to do that, but we set up, that was Sarah Lightman, an artist, and we set up this reading group called Ladies Do Comics, which we still run, and it was a focus on the graphic memoir, the type of work that we're doing, autobiographical, not necessarily by women. It's not a separatist women group, but it's led by women. And then I just thought I'd drop this in because this was a tweet by Durrell Cunningham, author of Psychiatric Tales, last year. The Kapow Comic Convention in April 2011 doesn't have a single female cartoonist as a guest. This says much about its very narrow focus. So so although there is masses of women's work emerging and being published, I just wanted to, it might be something we come back to at the end of this discussion. And now we're going to do a little bit of a double act there, aren't we? So we were thinking, we were thinking about, one of the things about Tangles and Billy, Me and You is there seems to be a lot of similarities both between us and also about our work. And so what we've done is put slides together and each selected images that refer to it. So the first one, obviously, it comes from our traumas that we had all those years ago. But I think what's also the same is they're both digested. So we both revisited years later. Did you think about doing anything at the time other than the little notes?
I did. I mean, it was interesting what you were saying, that we both had these things happen to us, and you said something like, this is the biggest thing that ever happened to me in my life. And I kind of felt the same way when my mom got sick. Like I realized kind of how immature I was and how the things that I thought were serious and traumatic really weren't. And it changed my life hugely. I was in my late 20s, but I was quite immature. So I think it forced me to grow up. So there was that. But also that, the reason I put that frame up there, so that's a frame where it's later in my mom's illness, and she loved nature, and she's just done this very strange thing of, she saw a wasp on the ground and she crushed it with her foot and killed it. And she would never have done something like that before she was sick. And I don't think her intention was to kill it. I think she just kind of saw it and touched it with her foot and mushed it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I just don't think she was that cognitively aware then. But at the time, I realized that I have this moment of like, I wonder what she thinks of herself. And then I realized, oh my God, like I have this idea that she exists somewhere else and can observe herself sick. And so part of, when you had talked about, when you had said the term digested, that was one of the things that writing the book allowed me to do, was kind of step back and write about what had happened, but also about my weird kind of thought processes and imaginings during it.
And also one of the things for myself coming back years later was people always ask me if it was catharsis. I don't know if you get that. And I think if I had done it as a catharsis at the time, it would have been such a different story. I think it would have been one of self-pity predominantly for myself, rather than at this point I'm thinking about, like you, all the things that happened and why did they happen, and in a more rounded way.
I think mine might have been a story of hatred.
Yes.
Because I was so angry at so many people. I was angry at all
and
people.
And it was everyone else's fault as well at the time, whereas now you think, oh, well, it's not that simple, is it?
No, I still think that.
Oh, that's because you're Canadian. And then I thought, well, also the identities of women, which is a big thing. But I was surprised about the frame you chose.
Yes, what we did was that Nicola put together these slides and then left a place for me to insert my my frames. Well, when you said identities as women, that was one of the things, well, partly what I mentioned, like, it was the biggest thing that ever happened to me, and I was very dependent on my mom at the time, even though we didn't live in the same city. I would call her all the time, and it's 4 hours later there, so call her in the middle of the night and wake her up and tell her that my girlfriend broke up with me, or that, you know, so-and-so hated me, or I was having this problem, and she'd kind of be like, oh, okay, honey, and be really sweet to me, and, you know, I was in my late 20s. So, but then I would be in these situations, like this is a frame from this chapter where my mom's had an accident and got to the bathroom in her pants, and then she gets in the bathtub, and I have to like deal with all the shit in the water and clean her off and get her ready for bed. And I just, like I wrote there are moments when you have a choice: fall apart or take a deep breath and just do what needs to be done. So the reason I put that panel in there is because I felt like when my mom got ill, I had this opportunity to grow up and become more of a woman as opposed to a child. And also that, I guess there was this time where, and I think this happens for a lot of people, and many of you probably experienced it, but where somebody gets ill who's close to you, and I just kind of thought to myself, like, what kind of person do I want to be? Like, do I want to be somebody who, you know, there was plenty of me that was really angry at my mom for getting sick, but it was like, do I want to be that person that's angry at my mom for being sick and self-pitying, or do I want to go home, roll up my sleeves, do the dishes, clean my mom up, change the sheets, stuff like that? And I think I had this real role model in my dad, because he had been really kind of floundering when my mom got sick, and then kind of pulled himself together and just was there for her. And so I, you know, so it's kind of that process of going through that.
Because, well, I'll talk about and then come back. But in my case, actually, it's worth noting that I was 32 or something. I was 32, so it's also that quite similar ages when these traumas happened. It wasn't, and I'm a bit older than you now. I mean, or am I? I think I'm younger.
I don't think you are.
But it's that thing as young women, straight from college, we're doing these books.
This happened to me
I think it's
14.
I think it is quite significant as well that we are women of, you know, that age. We're a bit older than, we're not just 20. I think we've got that life experience. So, like you say, you suddenly think, oh, I have to grow up. But in my case, I said I'm not a mother, but I'm not a mother. I don't have a script to follow. So what I meant by that is, you know, we're the society we live in very much dictates how women should be. You know, there's a pressure to have children, and there's a pressure to have a career. That the main thing is that idea. And so, and I was teaching English as a foreign language, so I wasn't I didn't have a career thing. I was just making money.
You're an artist.
Well, I wasn't an artist. That's the whole problem, because John was. He was an established artist, so he had his identity and went straight to his studio. But I was doing a little bit of drawing. I wasn't an artist. I was a TEFL teacher, and then I was thinking, oh, this is what I wanted. I wanted to be a mother, and then it was taken away from me. So it was, well, now what am I? Because I'm not like John. I don't have that identity of my passion, and I don't have a child, and I'm not. So it was awkward, and then so that's why I wanted to.
And then you were having these strange interactions with people where they would say, "Do you have children?"
Oh yeah, because everyone says that to all women. I think that's the other thing that happens to women. I think would you agree that you get up to about 30 and people say, so, you know, when you're going to have all that sort of stuff. So that was that sort of thing, and again reflecting back. And while I was in it, part of it, smug and I'm fine, and I didn't notice it. But being outside it, having that taken away, was quite strange and distressing for me. So the grief is very much about me and my identity. But what I thought for your one, the panel in your book that was really sort of so upsetting for me was where you're holding hands with your mother and those teenage boys are walking down the street yelling "Dyke." I just found that so sad and so awful, because again, you are a mother and you are a daughter. You know, you've got that mother-daughter relationship, a very close one. And you're a lesbian as well, but not with your mother. So it's this also this kind of weird. I don't know. I just
what do you think? My mom lived in this very small town in New Brunswick, which is if you're not familiar with Canada, it's kind of a small backwards province. I can just say that, right?
Yeah, I think
I'm
so.
not.
It's Canada.
But they lived in Fredericton, which is the capital of New Brunswick, but it's quite a small city and conservative. And I was walking down the street with my mom one day, and I'm like sitting, walking along, thinking, I love her so much. She's dying, and then these teenage boys are like, Dykes, Dykes, and I like got so enraged. And I went and like shoved my mom in the house and like ran after them. And I had this whole speech prepared that I was gonna like talk to them about homophobia. And anyway, I know it's so stupid. Yeah, but it really had a huge impact on me. Yeah,
it's very successful part of the book, I think. For me, it's really it's.
But I didn't put that panel in.
No, that's okay. But that's quite because that is. But then that's quite nice juxtaposition because I'd lost my role as carer, and you'd just taken on a role as carer. But it's not how we, caring for a child's very different to caring for your parent, isn't it? It's like, one is kind of, but for a child, I don't know, it's a different.
Well, I think both of us wrote our books because we kind of were going along in our lives and we thought they were going to be this certain way, and then all of a sudden they weren't, right? Yeah. And then we're like, we should write a book about it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my summary.
Yeah, that's established. Oh, then other people's responses.
Yeah, I think both Nicola and I we both have like got a lot of kind of dark pleasure out of making fun of other people who responded to our tragedies. So I had this one friend who actually had, really loved my mom and had known her since we were in high school together. But one time I had taken my mom over to her house, and my mom had just, kept forgetting things and saying them over and over. And my friend was telling me after my mom left how hilarious my mom was. And then I was just kind of like, wow, I don't actually think it's that funny. And she's like, well, you're going to have to learn to laugh or you're not going to get through this. And which is true, actually, because I did have to laugh to get through the situation. But I didn't want to laugh with her because she was laughing at my mom and telling me that I should too.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like who gets to laugh and
who's allowed to say that.
Yeah,
thing.
And you would rank people.
Oh yes, I had a page in the book which was the one page when we were going through the editing process that one of our circle of readers went, not sure if you should, it'll really make the reader uncomfortable, and the rest of us at Myriad went, yes, that's the whole point, is because it throws it back. It takes something that's incredibly personal, traumatic story, and opens it up to the public and how we all perceive, how we all judge. And I must say, I read that one and I can imagine myself exactly doing what your friend did. I can imagine myself. So it's part of the quality of the humour in these books is the discomfort it gives the reader of, oh, that's me, caught out. But it's all of us, it's just human response.
Yeah.
There's another bit in your book where they bring around the food, which I talked to you earlier about.
Yeah.
Where do you want to say?
Oh, just my parents have these friends who stopped talking to them when my mom got sick, but then one night Nicola's just going to keep bringing up the panel she wished I
You're putting the wrong one.
I'm sorry. But one night that they brought a casserole off and just rang the doorbell and sped away. But it's funny, I mean, I end up talking about this a lot in interviews, and I just feel like it's kind of, I just wanted to talk about how we often get really scared if somebody has somebody in their family who's dying, or somebody who died, like, oh my God, her kid died, what the F am I going to say to her?
Yeah.
And then you meet the person, like I could totally imagine like running into you, being like, something stupid, and then kind of running away.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I think it's the same for you. You put in those things, but then you can imagine yourself doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not like bad intentions. It's just
and I think
not knowing what to say.
That's really important. That all the people certainly my story, I know their intention was good, but that at the time
some of them were just idiots.
Yeah, but good-hearted idiots. And then we both of us had in our stories supportive partners, which is another. It's quite interesting, I think.
Yeah.
That, So in my case, John, who, during the story, he was the father of Billy, and then we got married, and he's the father of Sally, and so he, as I said, he was an artist, and he built me a workspace in my bedroom as I started getting more illustration commissions. So he understood that need to do that creativity.
Oh, that's Dynamo who would feed my mom carrots. She's right there. But yeah, I think that was an important thing to put in the book. Originally, I had a lot more about Dynamo in my book, but I had to cut her out a bit because, sorry. But I had originally envisioned my story as, I always knew that I wanted to write about my mom, but then it happened to start this relationship with Dynamo at the same time that my mom got sick, so I thought it'd be really cool to have these parallel stories. And then I also had this other thread that I wanted to do. I wanted to have 3 threads. The other was the biblical story of Miriam, because she was struck by God with leprosy in a way that I felt was unfair, and I felt like it was really connected to my mom's story because my mom's name was Miriam, and I just couldn't hold all those 3 parts together. So the story ends up being much just more focused on my mom's illness and dying, but Dynamos definitely in there.
But it is a little bit of a love story. I read it as your Tangles as a love story as well, with Dynamo. I think it's.
You feel better now.
Yeah, and I think, and I felt that when I was writing my story.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a love story because someone stays with you when you're going through that traumatic things. There's a bit in my book where a friend gave us a book, and the first line said 90% of couples split up after the death of a child, and so I closed it and gave it back to her. But it was always in my head of that's normal to happen. It's too much pressure and whatever traumatic experience. So it's
then you're both grieving at the same time.
Yeah, and might grieve differently. So on to that.
So then we
but then we didn't. I know we talked about this earlier. We didn't want to, or you talked about it with your book, and I recognise it. We didn't want to just make it a rose-tinted story. I think that's important because it's not rose-tinted, is it? I mean, although I know, well, we'll come to that. But so I know we had massive rows, and we had to do a whole walk, 2-hour walk all over again in a nice voice. So, in that with John, but and then so.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. I mean, there must just be so many kind of books for parents whose kids have died that may be presented in a more kind of rosy way, are there? Or like
I don't know.
I wonder if there's like taboos about talking about the fact that you guys must want to kill each other.
Oh yeah. But I think it's making the private the less thick, and that's what we've both selected to do in our books is show all of it, both sides.
Yeah, whether people want to know or not.
Yeah, solid. So and then the use, and then that's a bit religion starts to come in.
Yeah. So
okay. Well, I think it's really important. We already touched on to get through a traumatic experience. I think often humour is it's been written about that it's important, but I think when people hear about someone who's had a death of a child, they think even now their faces go a little bit. First of all, they get upset for you, but also they assume that every day I get up and think, oh, my baby died, when actually, of course, you don't really think about that, and even at the time, my memory is laughing. And when I revisited my written journals, a lot of what I'd forgotten was the humorous details, and this is one of them. And I think it's those humorous details that kept us going at the time, so I'm glad I wrote them down. But we had made this big thing, John and I have no religion, and that runs through my story, and we can discuss the religion thing a bit in a minute. But so we conducted the funeral ourselves, and so we didn't have a minister, we did the writing and a song, blah, blah. And then we were at the crematorium, and of course, undertakers and people who work in crematoriums, naturally, they speak to you really politely and sensitively. That's their job, is to make you feel comfortable and help you. But of course they take it. There's this great big cross there, and so he's whispering, "Shall I take the cross down?" to John, and John says, he says, "Shall he take the cross down?" And I could, what? And then this sort of thing, and then, well, I don't know, should we? And it was just sort of, the man was respecting our wishes, but it was this farcical thing where we were really nervous because we were about to talk, and then and then of course I had one friend, I think only one friend, who brought a child to the funeral. I really wanted John to come, and of course that was the first question he asked his mother, is, what was that thing at the back of the crematorium? And he meant the cross. What was that? So, I mean, there we are. We should have. But anyway, over to you for your fault.
Yeah, I decided to put in the farting one. But so many moments with, I mean, my family was really weird, and we had this weird sense of humor and weird jokes that we did with each other. But it was just this one time where, you know, we were all so sad all the time. And then my sister came into the room, was like, "Who farted?" And, you know, everybody denied it. And then my mom, who was very, very quiet at the time, would just kind of stand in the corner of the room all the time like this. She would just be like, "No, I think I did." And we just like laughed so hard and couldn't stop it. It was kind of that thing of
release.
Yeah, like you're so upset, but it's, you know, there's this, you're kind of on that seesaw between crying and laughter, and in any second you can kind of switch from one to the other. And we had this thing happen too after my mom died, right after my mom died. We stayed in the room with her for a while. She was in a nursing home, and we went out in the hallway, my sister and I, and this volunteer, like this bustling, very efficient volunteer, came up to us and was like, you know, "I want to give you a hug." And we had no idea who she was. We'd never seen her before. And we were just kind of like, "No, thank you." But like these, you're totally upset, but then these crazy things happen and you end up laughing, and it's like that's the only way you can survive. And I love that part about your book where, you know, every time kind of you came up against somebody official, like, you know, the funeral director or the florist got really mad at you because you wouldn't pick the proper
Yeah, we didn't want carnations. They were really keen on carnations. And
then it's like, what are you supposed to do but laugh?
I know, I think so at the times. And oh yeah, reference to reality, which brought the book back to, so you'll read it because of the graphic novel form, the comic form. I think you can read a book like this and then you get lulled into it's a story, and then suddenly this introduction of reference to reality brings the reader back to think, oh gosh, it's based in truth. So in your case,
my mom would, one of the things about her was that her handwriting just deteriorated as she got sick, and this was from a letter she sent me, and I would just trace her handwriting into the book, this was when she sent me an envelope that was full of dried autumn leaves all wrapped in a napkin. And she wrote, "I thought you'd like some autumn colors for your birth," and extras enclosed for Donimo, which was nice of her. But she always loved, before she got sick, gathering beautiful leaves. And she just, after she got sick, she would just kind of gather leaves, and some of them were beautiful and some of them weren't. And it was really sweet. And I don't know, I mean, it sounds like she was saying autumn colors for your birthday, but my birthday's in June, so it was just this weird kind of thing. So yeah, and then you included
oh yes, so these
Billy,
are
which is,
drawings from Billy.
Makes it even sadder.
Back of the book there's a little section on Billy. And then the religious framework. Oh.
Yeah, well, I actually did go through this stage of a few years when my mom got sick. We had never been religious, but I started going to synagogue, and it was actually a huge comfort for me. And after my mom died, I said Kaddish for her, which is like a prayer that you say for your parents when they've died. But I also wanted to, I mean, my mother was an atheist, and I think that if I had told her that I was going to say Kaddish for her, she'd been horrified. But, you know, it wasn't like I became super religious. Like I remember when my mom was dying, I came home about a day and a half before she died, and I sat by her bed with her sister, Suki. And so, yeah, like my mom was very clear that she didn't believe in God, but I was, and I wasn't sure, but I was usually angry at him when I did talk about him. And then, you know, Suki and I were sitting by my mom's bed, and we were so angry that she was 60 and dying that we just ended up giving God the finger. So I just wanted to include that part. There was my coming back to Judaism and drawing comfort from it, but also, I guess, keeping my still. But you were more clear that you were just like, religion is not for me.
It was, and this is again 16 years ago. So it was when we went to the undertaker. It was the first question was, have you a minister in mind? Whereas, I mean, the last year, John and I have been to 2 funerals with humanist services, so it's becoming different now. But then everything we did seemed to be, including my own guilt and torture in my head, was framed in this Christian way, really. So I would have loved the comfort of religion. And then in one of the books, there were no graphic novels for us to refer to, but we did a lot of reading about grief. And one of the books was A Road Less Travelled. I don't know if any, Scott Peck or something.
It's great.
Fantastic. And John and I we recommended it from a bereaved parent quite early on, and both read it and absolutely loved it, until there's something like a page from the end when it suddenly throws God in. And it was like, damn. It's sort of, for us, it just had this, and then the next book that we read, the follow-on one, is really cloaked in Christian frame, and it's sort of, so we did really search around. We thought maybe Quakers is a good religion for us, and in quite an earnest way. And I think part of it was we believe very strongly in the talking cure, and I think for us that was our religion, the psychotherapy that we went through. But it's a shame because psychotherapy is so private, whereas I think the good thing about a religion, I know I have a Jewish friend who said, well, in Shiva, which follows a death, people bring food to your house, and there's a collective, people are knowing how to behave. It's that, not knowing, but how to behave as well. So creative activity, both of us at the time.
Maybe that was
went
our
into
religion.
that. And maybe that too, or our therapy maybe at the time.
Yeah, I just included this page of when I had started writing about my experience with my mom as soon as she got sick, and when she was still just beginning to be sick. She said that she was really happy that I was writing about it, and she really wanted to talk about it publicly, and she wanted to work on a project with me. But then when I tried to read her some of what I'd written, she got very upset. It just kind of fell down on the floor and started to cry. And I think it was just really awful for her to hear me talking about it, and kind of to realize that it was true, or to hear what I was saying and it didn't make sense to her as a description of herself, and it was too disorienting. So I never shared it with her again. I shared it with my dad and stuff, that was something that I was really sad about, was that she had wanted to do, she wanted to do a video project with me, and she wanted to be open about it, but she really couldn't be, because it was too hard to understand, I think.
Actually, Sarah, to deviate slightly, I was just curious because at the time you were writing and drawing, but did you ever think about doing it as a prose book, as a novel?
Yeah, right up until after she died, and I kind of started looking at my drawings and pictures that I'd done. Then I started thinking of it as a graphic novel, but at that point I was just writing straight nonfiction prose, and that's what I read to them. I read this kind of description of the first summer when we realized something was wrong, and I think it ended up being too hurtful for her. Yeah, and you just drew it.
I just drew, but as I said in my introduction, it was the A to Z. It was these funny little gags about parenting and golf and health and fitness and all sorts of random things. It was nothing to do with the trauma. I think we're nearly, so, and then we included memories, didn't we, of how they were, which was, in my case, it was something that Myriad, right at quite near the end of the book, Myriad came back and said, we've read about you and the trauma, we just want to know about Billy, and can we have a little chapter that remembers him? And I think it's worked really well, because it's at the end of the book.
And that was the same feedback that I got from my editors.
Really?
Was one of the main revisions we did was when we were going through the book and doing revisions, they were like, there's not enough about your mom before she got sick for the reader to realize how the difference when she got sick and what a loss that was. So I went back and put in more about her and how she was. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't realised that bit. So I think people can read that.
They can.
And then the songs, which in my case, we had this Billy Boy playing, and we made everyone at the funerals sing it, and then every year John puts this in memoriam in the Guardian on Billy's death day, and he says it's the equivalent of putting flowers on the grave. But what's been amazing with the publicity that I've had around the book, it was there was a big interview in the Guardian Family, the Saturday Family page, and we got about 10 emails or letters saying every year I've noticed this in memoriam in the paper, and then they would write about their own story of, we have, one is I think she lost her husband the same day and has the little thing underneath it. So it was amazing because of course it doesn't say, what we put doesn't say anything about the story behind it, and so they were saying, oh, it's really great to hear the story, and but what a fantastic thing to happen, because every year I've said, oh, you're not still putting that in. How much does it cost now, John? Like this, and I sort of see it. Oh, come on, and he's very adamant about it. It's his way of doing it. So it's quite an interesting way that these stories then go off onto paths that everyone out there has their stories, and people get. Anyway, that was my song story.
That's so beautiful. I just like. I can't believe you put that in every year. I just put, there's different songs in my book, but I just ended up putting in a song because, that was just part of when after my mom died, we all came back to the house and got really, really drunk and ate chocolate chip cookies and read the song, the 23rd Psalm. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know, we both ended our stories with songs.
Yeah.
So,
oh yes, we did. That's interesting. Yeah. It's the end of that, because I was thinking of your other song.
Shall we open it up for questions?
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, everyone. We've got time for questions. Yeah.
I hope this is okay to ask.
Yeah.
You both appear to have done something which is very deep and personal to yourselves individually, obviously very true to how you feel. Do you find it easy to share something like that, particularly just to anyone who could pick it up? I mean, I can understand the process of wanting to do something like that, and to feel the need to write notes or even draw pictures while you're going through the experience, or even after it, but to actually take a step further and to actually pull it out to the outside world. How did you feel about that? Was that difficult to do?
Shall I go first? In my case, it was so long after the actual experience, 12 years when I came back to it, that the way I approached the graphic novel side of it was as a creative project. It was a very, very, in my head, it's a constructed reality, and I think the further away we get from a traumatic experience, we rewrite our history. So it's making a narrative and then remaking a narrative. So I think that's the point I meant by the graphic novel. Making of that wasn't a catharsis process for me, but what I did want it to do was make it a cathartic process for the reader, because one of the things people still, when I get to know new friends and I say, oh, I had a child, at a certain stage in our friendship, I'll say, when they're ready to take it, I say, I had a child that died, and their reaction is, how did you cope with it? How did you get up in those first few days? And so what I wanted to do with this book is explain that, and it is personal, but I wanted to also, the reason I brought it personally, and I'm sure Sarah's the same, the humour and the reactions, is because there's an idea of what you're supposed to do, and then it's what you're supposed to do. So that was one thing. And also the trouble is, I think it's maybe quite sort of shocking that someone puts something so private out, is because in our society, again, when you deal with a trauma, you deal with it in a therapist's room, or if it's psychological, it's very private. And if you have a terminal illness or something, you go to the hospital and you deal with it there. And I think what troubles us a little as people is that when you take a story from a certain context and put it into another, it's not expected. And I think that's actually the strength of using the graphic novel form, is people expect it to a certain extent. In literature, we have, from Angela's Ashes in the 80s, we've been exposed to people's very personal traumatic experiences, and it's happening in the graphic novel. But I think you know, our initial thing is when we see the comic form, we think, oh yeah, well, I know what I'm going to get. And so it's quite, oof, this is about quite a more personal side. So over to you. Sarah might give you a different answer to that.
No, I think it wasn't difficult by the time I did it. Because, I mean, it hadn't been as long, but it was, by the time the book was published, it had been 6 years since my mom died. So I do have times where I'm like, I kind of stop in mid-reading, or I think to myself, oh my God, I actually put that in the book, and there's people that I don't even know that about me. So I do have moments where I'm like, oh, kind of have a little, I don't know, not misgiving, but realizing what I've done, and kind of have this moment of like, I can't believe I did that. But overall, by the time I did it, most of my considerations, whether or not the end result was successful, were about how it worked as a story. And so it is, you know, it's about what happened, but it is constructed as a narrative and constructed as a story. So I had some distance from it, and I think the parts where, and that's why it was helpful to have like other readers and an editor who were like, okay, this part might work for you as far as you working out the story, but it doesn't actually work for the book. So let's take it out. Let's put something else in. Just that makes sense.
Yeah, I think both very brave. Which you had.
Are there any?
Oh, can I just say the other thing about that is I don't know if you felt this, but since my book has been published, I've realised, oh, actually, the responses I'm getting, it's helpful, or people who have been bereaved are recognising a lot of the similar things, and it makes me feel great that, you know, if there was someone who lost a child tomorrow and they picked up my book, they might feel I'm not alone in this, or I'm not. It's not just me who's going through this. So I think that's a bonus, and I think you must find that.
It's been really neat to connect with people since the book came out.
And I think it's that honesty in the approach that makes it can be a useful tool. Have another.
Well, I'll try to be unbiased here, but in reading both of your books, I think that I can tell both of you were really concerned about the narrative and the reader. And I think it was also that you chose to risk being real, to risk this level of honesty that doesn't just to the reader. There's heart in your books, and there's this depth that for me helps me connect with the story. And for your story, I've never been a parent, and I've never wanted to be a parent. And, you know, but the lack of a more coherent word, the heart in the book grabbed me, pulled me in, and that I think that there's a risk there in revealing yourself. And even though you have some distance from it, you're still choosing to be daring or brave or whatever you want, and putting yourselves in the books. And I really appreciate it.
But then you see, that's really nice for me to hear, because if you know, you're not a parent, you never want to be a parent, but it doesn't matter, you can still empathise, and I think and it's the same reading Sarah's book, it's that, and it's the same also about being women of a certain age. I read Sarah's book, a real curiosity about how do you cope with your parents when they've got a condition like that, because it can happen to any of us, and it's the same, you know, any close friend or family can die. How do you cope with these things? And I think it's the same when I read, there's some cancer graphic novels about living with cancer, and I read them because it could happen either to us or to a friend, or has already, and it's, what are we supposed to say, and what are we supposed to do? And, you know, the stuff about you caring and the rolling up your sleeves, it hadn't occurred to me that you'd have to do that with your parent, you know, because we know about it, but we don't know in that way.
I think even if you read a book and it's about a traumatic experience, like losing a child or whatever, that even if we read it and we're like, well, I would never do that, there's something about reading about those experiences that I think somebody could read my book and think, oh, I'm not sure why you know, we're not necessarily identified that they would respond in a similar way, but there's something about just normalizing the experience. And, you know, when I was, when my mom was dying, I read Elegy for Iris about Iris Murdoch by John Gillian, and just reading his book about his wife, who was, you know, this very vibrant intellectual woman and who got Alzheimer's. I don't know, it was like, wow, you know, here's somebody who's been there, and that's not that I have anything in common with him, but it was meaningful to me to read it. Yeah.
I think we're probably running out of time with the shop, but yeah, just to say, I mean, I think what you've both done so well is tell very kind of universal stories, but it's the particular. It's not like kind of, you know, it's the details, the particular details that make them your own. But actually, those are the things that you know, that, as you say, kind of, you know, you recognise you don't have to have gone through your particular experiences to have, you know, suffered a bereavement with somebody very close, or you know, to care for somebody who's sick, who's very close to you. And I think the reading those books is helpful, as well as also kind of fascinating too, and, you know, what you've gone through. And just as you saw your father coping, you thought that's how to do it. Anyway, Orbital Comics, and thank you, Camilla, for hosting this. They do have copies of both Tangles and Billy, Me and You for sale here, which I'm sure they probably kept their tills still open just in case anyone hasn't got them. But have a good trip back to Canada, Sarah, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you both, Nicola and Sarah.